The year 2024 was pretty eventful, filled with both good and bad things, and a whole lot of time that probably could have been spent doing something better. Nonetheless, with the majority of 2024 right behind me, I feel it worth it to look back and see where I've come along the way, the things that really spoke to me, and maybe some things that I would like to do in the new year. The bulk of this video is going to involve me presenting the 5 pieces of art or content that I engaged with, which really spoke to me and I would call a defining part of my 2024 experience. I don't personally consider this a top 5 favorite things of 2024 list. More, here are 5 things I would be willing to call my favorite thing of the year, if not for how hard it is to rank them all against each other. 2024 was the year that I read/watched Hunter x Hunter for the first time, and it rapidly after that became one of my all-time favorite action shonen narratives. Despite there being things I would personally critique about Hunter x Hunter, and specifically the 2011 anime adaptation, the sheer weight of the positives outweigh the negatives in my mind. One of my favorite things related to engaging with Hunter x Hunter for the first time in 2024 was getting the opportunity to be a part of the Hunter x Hunter community after the manga returned from its last hiatus in 2022. 2024 was the year I started really actively keeping up with Weekly Shonen Jump, and Hunter x Hunter becoming one of my favorite Weekly Shonen Jump stories, also returning from a 2-year hiatus, just made my experiences with the Weekly Shonen Jump magazine in 2024 so much more memorable feeling. Seeing all the online discussion about Hunter x Hunter start to bloom and spread out of the niche community that sort of holds on to the manga even between hiatuses, that was really nice to see. And another really nice thing to see was the rise of a lot of smaller YouTubers making content about Hunter x Hunter as the manga was releasing weekly. As somebody who had like 3 or 4 months before the magazine started releasing new chapters, a lot of the content that existed on YouTube prior, while very good, was starting to feel a little stale to continue going through. So seeing all those new faces was really a breath of fresh air. And of course, it's not as likely I'd be here talking to you right now without the support of the Hunter x Hunter community on a lot of the content I made when I was trying to find my footing in being a somewhat full-time YouTuber. To everyone who even just watched one of my videos this year, even if it was one of the non-Hunter x Hunter ones, thank you. And to all the Hunter x Hunter fans specifically watching this video, let's hope we don't have to wait too long until we get our next batch of Succession Contest chapters. I didn't expect Cyberpunk 2077 to be one of my favorite things I engaged with this year, in part because I frankly looked down on it and thought it was a little vapid. I mean, the game from a company that got outed as crunching its workers is gonna tell me about the evils of capitalism. I acknowledge that perspective I held was not only short-sighted, but jumping the gun and misguided as to what I thought Cyberpunk 2077 was trying to say. It is the textbook example of don't judge a book by its cover, and while its cover had "Trust us, the game isn't broken anymore" written on it, that still wouldn't have really been a super valid reason for me to look down on it as I did. Cyberpunk 2077 really wowed me with what it presented as far as a simulation adjacent angle for gameplay and the kinds of stories a player might have been able to tell by sort of really getting into the act of being a person in Night City. You know, I thought the gameplay was fun. I liked the way the guns handled. I liked being able to explore the open world. A lot of the side quests I did were quite fun. What really stood out to me personally, though, was the storytelling aspects of Cyberpunk 2077. Like, I already believe the initial premise of the game to be pretty solid, what with the main character essentially being slowly killed by another mind that was forcefully injected within them, and that mind is played by Keanu Reeves, as wonderful as he ever is. The thing that that really stood out to me about Cyberpunk 2077's overall storytelling efforts was how it presented on a broad scale the idea of people struggling to survive within this different yet somewhat adjacent world to our own. If the sheer conceptual complexity of Night City being as well realized as it is doesn't hook you on this idea, then all of Cyberpunk 2077's side quests and mainline quests dealing with purpose in a sense, or asking questions adjacent to it, will almost certainly pull you in. It is very much a story that deals with the aimlessness that comes with living in a world like Night City, and that aimlessness presented by every single corner of the game really spoke to me. And not to go into this too much, but just to bring it up because it is a very large part of what I ended up coming out of Cyberpunk 2077 enjoying, was specifically Keanu Reeves and his interpretation of Johnny Silverhand, the deuteragonist of the narrative. It does not feel very common to see Keanu Reeves portraying a character that is an asshole or is just straight up hostile to everybody around him. With Johnny Silverhand, though, he is actively antagonistic towards the main character and is just straight up a pretty unpleasant person to be around. Keanu Reeves' specialty of portraying a tragic soul very much shines through with Johnny Silverhand, but you need a little bit of time to get warmed up to the guy, and even after you do, he's still just a bad person, you could say. Johnny Silverhand, like anyone else you can meet in Cyberpunk 2077, is somebody who has been kicked down by the world repeatedly, but instead of taking his experiences as a reason to spread positivity and be a positive person within people's lives, all Johnny Silverhand seems to really do is push away the people who care for him, and then basically complain it's the world's fault instead of his own fault. He doesn't seem to yet understand that the one thing he can control in this world is how he reacts to what happens to him, which just leads to this really fascinating cognitive dissonance that his character employs. You know, it's all class consciousness and we should rise up against the rich, until he has to acknowledge that sex workers are just other people also trying to survive. This juxtaposition of Johnny Silverhand's ways of thinking and acting makes for an incredibly compelling character who is paradoxical in his very existence, and is one of my favorite personal examples of something Cyberpunk 2077 does well with its storytelling. This is probably my biggest sin to have to acknowledge in a video like this, but I only played the first Portal game in 2024. Keeping in mind that Portal is the franchise which introduced me to Valve as a broader company, and is arguably one of the biggest reasons I love the more implication-based style of storytelling seen within franchises like the Five Nights at Freddy's games. The short story version of this is that I came to know about the Portal franchise through a lot of videos I watched on YouTube when I was younger, and the only game I ever actually played for myself for a very long time was Portal 2 when I got a copy on my Xbox 360. I have been curious for a while now what specifically Portal 1 does and what it would act like as an individual title under individual examination, because the broad perspective on what Portal 1 tries to do is muddied by the existence of Portal 2. Needless to say though, Portal 1 being on this list is proof enough that I absolutely adore it, and honestly, I would be willing to say that I prefer Portal 1 to Portal 2. Now, keeping in mind that Portal 2 generally tries to be more bombastic, more focused on direct means of storytelling, and more iterative on the specific gameplay format of thinking with portals, so to say, it's a little silly to compare it with Portal 1 because Portal 1 and Portal 2 are trying to do completely different things. I still think that Portal 1 generally has more artistry to what it attempts and is more valuable as an individual piece of art to examine when compared to specifically what Portal 2 tries to attempt, not just as a sequel to Portal 1, but as a new iteration in the Portal franchise. You could argue that Portal 1 is where things started, but Portal 2 is where it became what everybody knows it as. Portal 1 has this really distinct harrowing and quiet atmosphere to it. Being such a short game game that you can complete in maybe 1.5 to 2.5 hours. The creators seemingly had to lean a lot more on narrative and world building components to make the game feel a lot larger than it actually was. You are left with this puzzle game starting out as if it feels very gamey and slowly becoming more grounded and real feeling as you realize something is very wrong. You know, like if you're supposed to be a person doing tests within this scientific facility, where are the scientists watching you do these tests? Why has the only person you've heard so far been this lady with a robotic voice over the speakers? Where is her voice coming from even? Why does this facility look so clean yet also has dirt and grime in areas that you'd assume people are sent to regularly clean up? Portal 1's atmosphere is just incredibly unmatched in my eyes when compared to all of Valve's other titles, including Portal 2, which iterates on Portal 1's atmosphere in certain areas. And it elevates Portal 1 from what is otherwise a pretty fun to play and memorable game experience to a narrative experience that is incredibly tense and compelling. "2024 was also the year that I watched the entirety of One Piece for the first time. And frankly, what do I have to say that making like a 2 or 3 hour long video down the line wouldn't? Wikipedia lists One Piece as the best-selling comic series ever, at an approximate sales amount of 516.6 million sales. On the website My Anime List, One Piece is ranked number 4 on the top manga list for the entire website. I know this is probably considered cheating. I know it's not very satisfying for me to list statistics to you about why One Piece is so great, but I feel like before I can start going into listing individual things I like about One Piece, keeping in mind that I can't list everything in this video, the number one thing that will do as good a job as I can at expressing why One Piece is worth checking out is just how many people do think it's worth checking out. One Piece is one of the strongest manga and anime I have ever engaged with when it comes to understanding the story it wants to tell and the ideas it wants to get across. Time and time again, between several story arcs that feel like they can be from completely different stories entirely, One Piece conveys its themes and ideas so masterfully that it is incredibly cohesive as a single product. You know, I get it. You look at that chapter count, you think, how can there be 27 years worth of a story to tell? What story needs over 1,100 chapters to tell itself? And to that I say, that number of chapters starts to feel way too small when you actually start reading the story. You have ideas like the log poses and the ways they help pirates navigate to islands, the poneglyphs / the 1,000-year gap of time in history, the golden age of pirates, the story of Goldie Roger and what the One Piece is, Joy Boy, Devil Fruits, Hockey, the race of fishmen or Lunarians, the world government, the 7 warlord system, the 4 emperors of the sea, the Grand Line, islands like Laugh Tale. One Piece is the largest narrative universe I have ever engaged with, and it is a world that is brimming with life and things to explore, as much it is also focused on a very specific set of ideas. One Piece is a story about freedom. It's about why freedom is worth chasing after. It's about inherited will, the destiny of the age, and the dreams of the people. It's about the things that make life worth living, even through all the pain and sadness that can be felt. And for that reason alone, I think One Piece is absolutely something everybody needs to give a chance at some point, because I gave it a chance through so many times of wanting to drop it because I wasn't really fully on board. I continued to give it a chance, and it has changed my life for the better. I love One Piece, but there is something else that spoke to me more this year that I think I love even more. I call myself a storyteller and a writer, but you probably wouldn't be able to tell that from just how little I've finished and released properly. If there's anything I've been tested on in the year 2024, it's whether or not I want to create art. You know, I will never lose my love of storytelling and engaging with stories, but trying to tell your own is another thing unto itself. It is frankly frustrating and at times unfulfilling, and like you're screaming into a void that nobody is obligated to observe you within. It's like you'll never be good enough. It's like the whole world is against you. It's like bad art shouldn't exist, so why should you even try if everything you make is just gonna turn out bad like you feel it is? Like no matter how hard I worked, nothing would ever get close to the standards I hold myself by. Art and creating art will always be an uphill battle with yourself. You'll always have to tell yourself that practice makes perfect, that getting attention and looks from others isn't what matters, but how you feel about the thing you made and whether or not you enjoyed making it. Making art isn't just as straightforward as having an idea and putting it to paper. It's a process. It's a struggle. It's like you're fighting against the waves trying to stop them from drowning you. What matters most is when you feel you've been kicked down, that you get back up and that you don't stop trying. This is why Look Back spoke to me as much as it did, because it convinced me not to stay on the ground, that I had to keep trying. Look Back reminded me that what's important is that I want to make art and that I continue to do so. It reminded me that quality can come next, that speaking to others emotionally doesn't have to be the goal, because if I want to make something, I have the tools to do so, and I have no excuse not to. After what felt like forever stewing in my own angst and self-hatred, being given the opportunity to leave my element, go somewhere else, and engage with a work like Look Back, it made me realize that I haven't given up yet, and I never will. It's like an itch in the back of my skull I can't scratch. It's like I can't breathe if I don't try to create. Art is what drives my soul, and if I stop trying to make art, I stop living. Out of all the things I engaged with this year that remind me why I want to tell stories, Look Back is the one that spoke to me the most. It told me that it's okay to feel the things I'm feeling, as long as I don't use that as a reason to stop creating art. So, in 2025, no matter how bad I feel my work is, I'm not going to stop creating art, because when I look back and think about the reason I started in the first place, I have yet to find a reason why I shouldn't continue.